Israel and Hamas have agreed to the initial phase of a peace plan. Joining us to discuss is Rabbi Yaakov Menken, Executive Vice President for the Coalition for Jewish Values and Advisory Board member of the U.S. Religious Liberty Commission. So, Rabbi, good to see you again. Can we get your emotions that you're feeling right now amid everything, including that there's an agreement to have the hostages returned?
You know, it's very, very good. You see, there is cheering, there is dancing throughout Israel. You know, after years of being told how Israel was seeking genocide, the Israelis are just delighted to have peace, delighted to have an end to this horrible conflict, and of course the release of the hostages. It is bittersweet as always because you're dealing with an explicitly genocidal terror organization. The goal of Hamas is no different than the final solution proposed by the Germans. And the fact that Israel, as part of this deal, has to let go on behalf of innocent hostages, they have to release hundreds of murderers, hundreds of people with actual blood on their hands from killing Jews, just like the hostages, simply for being Jews. That makes it bittersweet. But obviously, the overall feeling is one of relief and delight that this should finally be coming to an end. And, you know, a gratitude to President Trump and this administration for making that possible.
You know, Rabbi, a number of guests that I've speak to over the past week are saying they feel a sense of cautious optimism because, after all, this is Hamas that we are dealing with. So can we get how you feel? How optimistic are you about this peace agreement actually lasting?
My one real concern was that I now understand that what it says in the agreement is that those released terrorists will actually be allowed to go back into Gaza. My initial understanding was that they would be expelled. They'd be able to find a home somewhere. The Arab world is a huge place. And sadly, there are a huge number of those people indoctrinated to hate Jews and want to kill Jews. But if they're in Algeria, they don't pose a huge threat because Algeria has already ethnically cleansed out all the Jews who used to live there. The same is true of Iraq. There are places that these people could be sent where they could no longer pose a threat. Gaza is literally on the doorstep. It is a place, by the way, where for centuries Jews used to live. This idea that it was always Arab territory is part of the anti-Semitic mythology that has always surrounded the conflict. But the idea that these people should be able to move back there and be on the doorstep, that's what keeps the optimism at most cautious, because I don't know how much we are simply kicking the can down the road.
All right, Rabbi, let me ask you this. And as you know, the plan sees Gaza being governed by Palestinian technocrats and then eventually transferring control to the Palestinian Authority. What do you think about this?
It's interesting. I believe it's the government of the Philippines, where the foreign minister just announced, well, we'll be happy to recognize a Palestinian state as soon as we can be presented with a Palestinian government devoted to coexistence and peace. You currently have, or had, at least before the war, you had two governments of so-called Palestinians who are just Arabs, because like the rest of the Middle East, and one of them was paying the families of terrorists generous stipends to reward the families whose children go out to commit terrorism. And the other was an explicitly genocidal terror organization. Neither one of those qualifies. And that's really the biggest problem here. This idea that we're going to have a Palestinian government that's actually able to maintain control before literally a generation. Think about the denazification of Germany. These people are going to need literally decades to unlearn hatred of Jews as their reason for existence. They literally have schools named after arch terrorists based not on their scholarly contributions to the betterment of humanity, but the number of Jews that they killed. And that's a problem that's going to persist long beyond the end and peace treaty that follows this.
Is it possible to have Hamas have no role or any influence in Gaza governance?
Well, that's supposed to be Trump's condition. So we're going to see what really happens to that. It is a problem when, right now, if you look at the Gaza Strip, first of all, there is no peace movement. There's nobody. There's no leadership anywhere, not in Palestinian Authority territory, in Judea and Samaria, not in Gaza, where they're actually advocating for peace and coexistence. What you have is the people who are not supporting Hamas are not supporting Hamas because they kept this going for too long and their own houses got destroyed. But otherwise, they were supporting Hamas. And if they weren't supporting Hamas, they were supporting Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Progressive Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or any of the other terror organizations that used to function in the Gaza Strip. What's going to be seen down the road? They need an entirely new form of not only of government, but of the community's allegiance. And that's going to take, like I said, decades to develop.
Okay, Rabbi, I'm wondering here as well, what is the feeling right now among Jewish communities towards what's happening towards the Israeli government?
Well, it's really not about the Israeli government. It's amazing to watch, I am very critical about the Israeli government about a lot of things. One of them was not seeking the release of hostages. One of them was not wanting to eradicate the Hamas threat to Jewish lives. I mean, that's just crazy talk. Obviously, people were using the Israeli government as a flimsy way to claim that they don't hate Jews while they're seeking the genocide of Jews. It's just, Hamas continuing to function is seeking genocide. To claim it's somehow evil to want to eliminate Hamas, as people have argued to me, directly, that's advocating for genocide because Hamas was explicit that if given the opportunity, they would go out and do it again. What we're watching right now is Israel's security reputation has developed and it's making new friends. I mean, this is one of the things that Trump wants to do here. He considers the Abraham Accords one of his signature accomplishments. He wants to see Arab nations welcoming trade and interaction with Israel at the very same time that the Europeans have come on board with demonizing Israel. It's really it's a return, a very sad return of Europe to a millennia of hate towards Jews that just found a new facade in the state of Israel.
Okay, Rabbi, if I may, I would just like to ask you one more question. What impact would an end to the fighting in Gaza have on incidents of anti-Semitism in the U.S. and worldwide?
That's really anybody's guess. The excuse is gone. I mean, it was always an obvious excuse. They were going around chanting about how Israel is committing genocide. There's never been a case in history where the people you needed to drag to the peace table were the people claiming to be the victims of genocide. It just doesn't work that way. This whole thing was nonsense. I mean, obviously, these are the same people who claim that Israel was committing genocide in Gaza for the last 20 years, while the population grew exponentially. After October 7th, they immediately pointed out that over half of Gaza's population was under 18 because the population was growing so much. So, that was anything but a genocide. It was never honest. It was never serious. So now the question is, okay, the fighting is over. Your excuse is gone, guys. They are still marching today, by the way. I mean, look at it. Right now, there are marches and demonstrations against Israel in favor of Palestine when the conflict is supposedly over. What's that all about? Well, the answer is it never was about anything other than hate.
Well, Rabbi, we always enjoy having you on the show. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much for these opportunities.